Speaking of picking, gosh, I've got a bunch of picks laid out here. I'm just going to start at the beginning. Um, the last couple days I was working on something that I always see Perry doing, where rather than moving my wrist as much up and down, which is really what I come from the Al Di Meola instructional video high school days, is more of like the thumb and index finger movement. Would you say that's kind of a thing you've adopted, Perry?
Somewhat, yeah. I want to hear what you're doing with that, but yeah.
Sure.
Go ahead. You go first.
So if I play an A major scale, I'm really ideally not really moving my wrist that much, as opposed to if I'm doing it the way I kind of came up doing it. Do they sound different?
They don't really sound that different, and so I think the technique that you're talking about comes from someone named Jack Peterson, who was one of the stalwart teachers at the University of North Texas for a lot of years. I think his tenure, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think his tenure was like the 70s, 80s, maybe even like late 60s. But a lot of guys that came out of that department during that time were able to adopt this technique where they like use the joint on the thumb to kind of move the pick, across the string essentially. And I do that a little bit, but my specific technique for those moments has more to do with the first finger underneath the thumb and kind of the movement with that, because when you move that joint finger on your thumb, that can be kind of tricky for your rhythmic articulation to keep it consistent. So, this is, by the way, this is a great episode for the people who are subscribed on Patreon, because they can see what the hell we're talking about. And it is really important for guitar when it comes to picking technique. But if you guys can see this, I'll sort of demonstrate what Will's talking about a little bit more, like, as opposed to like a large... As opposed to a large movement with the thumb, it's more of a subtle movement with the first finger, and it's usually just for like faster passages, whether they be like, so like if here's eighth notes, you can see the thumb's not moving very much.
So you're contracting your index finger.
But when it comes to eighth note triplets, you can see there's just a little bit of movement coming from that first finger. And that's sort of how I've been able to try to articulate those subdivisions a little bit more smoothly than like more of that wrist motion or plucking every single note. So it's also tied to like a legato technique with your left hand. So it's a little involved, a little complicated to discuss within a few minutes, but that's sort of the general consensus.
I think that's great, and I think it depends a lot also on the pick you're using. Maybe something like a teardrop pick or I guess what you would call a Jazz 3 shape pick is really great for that. But like if I try it on like a bigger triangle size,
you could just choke up too,
Yeah. Another thing, like with big picks, I love the string noise.
Yeah.
Like some people might actually like discourage you from getting that, right? And maybe if you're playing an arch top plugged in, John, I'm sure you'd agree, you might not want to get that string noise, but like on an acoustic.
Yeah, that little kind of edge to it.